Hello and welcome to the Deception Tips podcast, where you will learn amazing cues to detect deceit that will help you read people like never before. I'm your host, Spencer Kaufman. Let's get started.
Welcome to episode 57 of the Deception Tips podcast. Last time we talked about a deception tip that was a 3-in-1 tip. It was combined. It encompassed a few different tips that we talked about long ago from before. They were locking the ankles, crossing the legs at the calf muscle in the form of an X, and also backing away. So if you don't remember those, take a listen to them. You can also check out the Deception Tips videos on the Body Language YouTube channel to get a little bit more information about them, because they are very important. So locked ankles was episode 22, which would also be Deception Tip 22 or Video 22. So it is pretty convenient for you that they are all the same. Stepping backward was episode 29. Again, same as Video 29 or Deception Tip 29. And then towards the exit was episode 50 or Deception Tip 50. So listen to those, get a good idea of what they are. Then if you need to listen again to episode 56, be sure to watch the video, read the deception tip, etc., because then you'll have an idea of how those three fit together to form a new tip. Now remember, it isn't really a pattern or a cluster of behaviors because they are all in the same area. It's all happening together as one fluid movement. Therefore, it's not like it is multiple behaviors happening independently of each other, combining to make a pattern or cluster of behaviors. A cluster is separate behaviors happening within the same region or similarity, proximity of each other. It's like one thing, then maybe a little bit later in the conversation, another thing, then another. It's not all at the same time. Whereas this behavior, the ankles backing away, when someone locks their ankles, they tuck their feet under their chair, they've got their calf muscles crossed in that X, that's all happening together at the same time, which means it's not considered a cluster. Now, if you saw that with the arm folding, the hunching of the shoulders, and the leaning back, that could be a cluster because that's two separate behaviors. Even though the arm folding, hunching of the shoulders, and leaning back, that's three behaviors, but that's, again, just like the feet, where it's all happening simultaneously together. It's all happening up on the arms together, so therefore it is not a distinct cluster or a pattern of behaviors. It's one gesture, one behavior. So keep that in mind. Be on the lookout for that, and always look for those patterns and clusters of behavior so that you'll be able to know when they're happening versus when it's just a singular behavior and what they mean. That's also important. So today we have another expression. This one is more closely related to the face, and it has to do with expressions of emotion and how these expressions are situated on the face and in what orientation they occur. It is sort of similar to some that we've talked about before. Way back in episode 14, we talked about symmetrical expressions and how facial expressions need to be symmetrical on the face. That means they need to be both on the same, on the left and the right. They should happen equally or symmetrically across the face, kind of like that cartoon thing in the coloring books where they draw half and then you use the grid paper to draw the other half. Symmetrical expressions. Then we also talked about in episode 16 symmetrical gestures, that gestures should be symmetrical with each side of the body, like a shoulder shrug should happen on both sides. We've also talked a lot about different things with simultaneous gestures. That was in episode 12. We've talked about different things like contradictory behaviors in episode 3. There are a lot of similar things with deception and how they should be congruent and symmetrical, and they can't be asymmetrical or contradictory, things like that. So today we're talking about asymmetrical expressions. Now, if truthful expressions must be symmetrical, then by reasoning, if you see an asymmetrical expression, it's probably going to be false or non-truthful. So here it is. This is deception tip number 57. Asymmetrical facial expressions are associated with deception and are usually indicative of non-spontaneous or voluntary emotional expression. Here it is again, deception tip 57. Asymmetrical facial expressions are associated with deception and are usually indicative of non-spontaneous or voluntary emotional expression. So what does this mean? There's a lot there and there's a lot of big words. Well, don't worry, because it's really simple. Asymmetrical facial expressions. That means that they're not the same on both sides of the face. So if you have an expression that's not the same on both sides of the face, remember we talked about how expressions on the left side of the face with the asymmetricality, that was in episode 23. If they're more on the left side, it's more truthful. Right brain, left brain, how they coordinate with each side of the face and the body. They're contralaterally related. And which side of the brain is more prominent in deception? Remember, it is the right side of the brain. And then remember that contempt in episode 19 is the only asymmetrical expression that is truthful. So we're going to dive a lot more into this sign and a lot more into all of the recap and a lot more into symmetricality and asymmetricality coming up right after this.
Would you like to know if you're being lied to? Lies are everywhere, and they could be happening to you. A Guide to Deception is a great book filled with information on how to spot lies. Get your copy today online at spencerkaufman.com.
Welcome back to Deception Tip 57. Here we are talking about symmetricality and how asymmetrical expressions are mostly associated with deceptive behaviors or deception. Usually when something is asymmetrical, then it is false or it is voluntary emotional expressions. Now, symmetricality goes the same with facial expressions and with body language. So remember that as well. So here we go. Asymmetrical facial expressions, that's what we're talking about. They are associated with deception. Now, it's usually indicative of the non-spontaneous. Remember, spontaneous is something that really can't be controlled. It just happens on the spot. Spontaneous on the spot. Okay? So, surprise when someone slams a book shut and everybody kind of jumps in a little bit of fear, startlement, surprise. That is a spontaneous expression. Now, if someone slammed the book shut and a couple people jump and then later someone else jumps, that would be a non-spontaneous. They faked that. It's voluntary. They volunteered that expression forward. It's fake. It is not real emotion or not a real reaction. So usually those would be asymmetrical. Why? Because they're fake. Remember, the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. Now also remember that when people engage in false emotion, it is something that they are doing voluntarily. It is a lie. It is deception. So it's not going to be symmetrical or fluid, and in addition, they're going to last longer. Therefore, one side of the brain is more prevalent in deception than the other side of the brain. This usually means that you're going to see it more on one side of the body. Therefore, watch the left side, because remember, if the left side is more expressive than the right, it may indicate false emotion or deception. This is because the right brain is more prevalent in deception or being false or deceptive emotions. Remember, that right brain is that creative or artistic style, so they want to concoct the stories or feign different emotions, whereas the left side is more rules and rigid and set structure, language. They're not going to be lying on the left side. Now, the left side would control the right side of the face, so if you see the left side of the face more active, then watch out for the deception, because the right brain is more active in deception. So that asymmetrical facial expressions that you see, it's most likely going to be occurring on the left side of the face. But remember, the right side of the face will also even out, because it's the whole conscious that wants to make sure that it looks real. So it's going to be a little bit more prevalent on the left side. You may see it there first, it may finish there last. But just like a smile. When you see someone faking a smile, they may start to smile more on the left side, right side comes up to equal it out. Then when it goes away first on the right side, then it kind of comes down on the left. Because that left is trying to push out there that the smile is really, truly real. So remember, that's asymmetrical. It's false. So watch out for these asymmetrical expressions on more of the left side of the face. Now, in case you don't remember, we talked about the left side. We had a whole episode on that, a whole deception tip on that. And again, there's a video and then in the book as well, deception tips revised and expanded, and then also just the regular deception tips. You can grab them anywhere on my website, spencerkaufman.com. But anyway, episode 23 was the one where we talked about the left side of the face. So you've got a lot of recap to do to listen to all these things. We're in a big thing of symmetricality. We've talked a lot about congruent gestures, symmetrical gestures, asymmetrical gestures, and simultaneous gestures. So that's a lot of stuff. We had contradictory behaviors. I'm going to make this a little bit simpler for you. If you go on YouTube, on the Body Language YouTube channel, I will put all of these that are related in playlists so you can watch a series of videos that's all related to symmetricality, asymmetricality. That'll greatly help you out. Then you can go take a look at the numbers, go over to the podcast, listen to that podcast episode, and you'll really understand what is going on with all of these different things that are related to each other. So that will be very helpful for you. I encourage you to do that. But continuing on, asymmetrical facial expressions. That could be with any sign of emotion or deception. Somebody wants to pretend they're happy, they smile. Somebody wants to pretend they're sad, they're going to frown. Where do you think the frown is going to be more prevalent? Right or left? Hopefully you said left, because remember, the right side of the brain is associated in deception. Okay, keep going. Things like contempt, where do you think that would be more prevalent? Contempt is, remember, the only truthful asymmetrical sign of body language. So it is a truthful sign. It is emotion. It is coming out. It is contempt. Now, if contempt is truthful, okay, let's follow some reasoning. Contempt is truthful. It is asymmetrical. The right side of the brain is more prevalent in false emotions. So the left side of the brain would be more prevalent in truthful emotions. Therefore, contempt is being truthful should be more dominant on the right side of the face because it is controlled by the left brain, which is more truthful. That doesn't mean you won't see contempt on the left side of the face. However, if you see it on the left side of the face, consider that it could be a false form of contempt, or it could be something else. So that's something to consider. It's a little wrench in your plan. It is really the only one you need to remember for asymmetricality. Otherwise, you remember, hey, everything asymmetrical, false. Contempt, true. Only asymmetrical one. Therefore, if you remember that, you'll be set. You'll be fine. In addition, pay attention to yourself. When you notice things happening on your face, you notice a half smile. Is that contempt? What were you thinking? What happened? Did someone do something stupid or say something stupid and you're kind of like, whatever, man, and you gave a sign of contempt? Almost like an eye roll. That's about what a contempt is. It's this feeling of superiority or better than. It's an eye roll, kind of, but it's an eye roll of the face, and it's a little bit more extreme than an eye roll. If you see it on someone, you want to pay attention and be like, whoa, what's going on? Why don't they like me? What am I doing to make them so almost disgusted with me? It's almost like disgust. It's a precursor. So pay attention to that, because that is important, especially if you have employees and you're seeing it on your employees. You may need to have a conversation with one of those employees if you're starting to see contempt, because that's a serious deal. So, back to this, watch out for the asymmetrical facial expressions, because they are a sign of false emotion and deception that you will want to pay attention to so that you know that you are not being lied to. You want to make sure that you are getting the truth. So I want to thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Deception Tips Podcast. I hope that you'll share it with your friends, subscribe to the feed, check out the Deception Tips videos, the blog, and also take a look at the books I have available. And as always, tune in next week for a new deception tip.